we go along. But welcome everybody to the webinar, How to Prospect in a Tough Market. Lovely to have you all. As we all know, this is for sales and marketing leaders and reps who understand that the past 6 months have been a really tough slog for a lot of people and a lot of teams as well. And I guess they're just here to understand different ways to arm themselves and their teams to drive more success with their outbound prospecting. Um, for everyone who doesn't know, my name's Georgia Kerwin. I'm Head of Sales Development here at Engage Tech. I've been with the company for over 3 years now, and I've managed our delivery and new business SDR teams with the pure aim to help drive performance, increase motivation, and just really increase overall business for our clients and our company as well. If you're not already familiar with Engage Tech, we essentially help B2B technology companies to build better pipeline. And we do that in a few different ways. First is we can assist like internal sales teams to speak to more IT buyers who are actually in the market to buy. And that is through our sales intelligence platform. Or if there are those companies out there that just don't have that internal resource, we can help fill the gap with our outsourced SDR services. So you can book those qualified meetings within your ICP. So overall, we're just trying to help companies to have as many opportunities coming into the funnel to help build their pipeline and drive those revenue results. But without further ado, I want to introduce our lovely speakers. We've got our very own VP of Sales, Paul McCarthy. He's been a huge driving force behind like Engage Tech as a whole. For the past 8 years has worked his way up from being an SDR, like a lot of our senior people have been, all the way to being the director of our core delivery function, all whilst closing out very large deals at the same time. Very good at multitasking, I must say. Paul is now managing our new business function and is here to share all of his expertise and tips and tricks that sales leaders can take to repurpose for their own teams. So, hello, Paul. Welcome.
Hey, Georgia. Thanks for the introduction. Excited to be here.
Me too. And we also have the lovely Robin Burr from UGen Sales Training. I must say, it's been great to meet you over the past couple of weeks. I'd say Robin is probably one of the most intuitive and dynamic sales trainers that are in our space at the moment. He specializes in transforming elite reps into, I guess, even more elite reps. And that's using a multitude of tactics, whether that's like psychology, influence, persuasion techniques to really increase those sales and performance. So very, very excited to learn from him because I've already learned a lot from him already. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Lovely. Well, look, on this webinar, we are going to share some top tricks, top secrets and insights for sales and marketing leaders to either supercharge their outbound sales team performance, increase motivation, because we know that a lot of that comes into, actually being able to sell and get opportunities through the funnel. Understand the best ways to collaborate and increase sales conversations as well within, those prospects that we really want to speak to. And what that all means from like a enablement, tooling and training perspective as well. So with that being said, let's just jump in. Paul, first question for you. I think we can all agree it's been, as I said, a pretty tough 6 months when it comes to selling in general. As someone who speaks to companies and sales leaders about building pipeline generation every day, like what would you say is some of the biggest trends that you're seeing at the moment?
It's a good question, Georgia. And I suppose maybe to preface this, we speak with about 50 businesses every month at a very minimum around this topic. So pipeline generation, SDR performance. And it's really easy to boil down the top 3 areas we're seeing. And it doesn't matter if we're speaking to a sales leader, marketing leader, or a business owner. It's all reasonably similar. And the first one is there's been a real shift in the channels that are working for businesses right now. Channels that have been historically successful for companies are starting to underperform from where they were a year, 2 years ago. And this might be from events, inbound leads, their partner network, ultimately leaving a gap. And then as you progress down the funnel, overall conversions from opportunities are lower. Deals are taking much longer to close. I don't think that's news to anyone on here. And there are many more people involved in decision making. Investments in software or services are coming under so much more scrutiny, which is leading pipeline coverage to be essentially wrong and forecasts to keep slipping month on month, which naturally creates nervousness around target attainment. And I think finally, what we're hearing is customers and companies are really struggling to drive engagement within their ICP. And what I mean by that is, again, at the top of the funnel, SDRs aren't having enough conversations with who they need to be, or if they are, it's not the right time. And sales reps, there's a general consensus, don't feel like they have enough tangible and good meetings in the diary, which means there's a real desire for businesses to really drive their engagement now, all while customers are being much more cautious with their spend. So it creates a dilemma. The leaders I referenced are having to be much more efficient. They have much less room for error with any spend or use of resource, and they need to generate more results when what has worked before hasn't worked now. So that's a general summary of where we're seeing the main trends.
And look, I'm sure that all of us on this call and a lot of those that are watching, those challenges aren't new for a lot of them. And I think, as you said, there's a lot of businesses that are out there doing quite well as well in this environment. And something that we're going to double down on later on in the webinar. But I guess over to you, Rob. I'm keen to hear your perspective. When we called up before the webinar, you had some pretty strong thoughts on this topic when it comes to market change. Have you seen a big difference in how a rep has changed their approach when it comes to prospecting in general, since the past 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, sometimes I think, and I remember the conversation that we had, and I was a little bit cynical of the market change, and where that comes from is that I think that when times get tough and there's economic downturn, and let's not pretend we haven't been here before, everyone freaks out and they go, "Oh, the market's changing," and they, average reps, blame the market conditions before thinking about, well, what can I do? And I think that's a real there's a real lack of accountability that I don't see in top performing reps. So if you've got a top performing SDR, top performing salesperson, top performing business owner, they will very much look at recessions and market changes as just another chess move that they have to make. They don't get freaked out about it. They have already anticipated that it might happen and have a game plan. And I see this particularly in a lot of businesses that sales managers who have been in the game for a while and perhaps recall other economic downturns or challenges that we've had years ago. We've had COVID, and further back we had the 08 crash. And in those instances, if those sales managers were just allowed to ride the storm, the business, they would struggle, they would meet under quota, they would say, well, it's the market conditions, and the business would float that cost and go, well, okay, and they just they weather the storm.
Yeah,
I don't think it's good for actually enhancing the ways to get out of this situation. If you were fortunate to be through an economic downturn previously and you've been in this before, a lot of people were just like, yeah, it was tough, and then it just went. They didn't actually do anything different. And that's the problem, because top performers, they don't weather the storm, they dance in the rain.
I like that.
You know what I mean? That they think about what locus of control they have. And I'm not saying that things aren't challenging out there. I'm just saying it's like, what are you going to do about it? So yeah, sometimes it's, I think, accountability, and like, what action can we take right now to change our approach? Looking at the process that we have, do I have a solid process? And what do I need? What levers do I need to pull? What do I need to change? How am I measuring that change? But if you've been here before, I think one of the questions you asked, we spoke about before, was very much the title of this this conversation. How do you prospect in a tough market? Should be the same as you prospect normally if you're any good. And I think that's you shouldn't be, or you should be minimally affected by market change. If you've got a solid process, you've got solid people, and you know what you're doing, yes, there are some changes you're going to have to make. But if you are rethinking, if you're a sales leader rethinking your whole sales strategy just because there's a bit of economic crisis, that's not a sustainable strategy. It's just a bit weak. That's my rant. I've started early.
No, I like it, and I love the dancing in the rain point. I think, like, when we spoke earlier, and Paul, when we were speaking today, like, there are always going to be things that people can blame underperformance on, or a reason why things aren't going right. But there's still going to need to be targets to hit, and often when we're speaking to sales and marketing leaders every single day, targets are only increasing. And it's going to keep going like that for years and years to come, regardless of what kind of comes in our way. So I think, from your perspective, Paul, I'm keen to hear, when it comes to prospecting and pipeline generation, and I guess those levers that Robin just mentioned, what do you think companies need to be prioritizing right now?
Yeah, I had a feeling this was going to come up, and one thing I had a look at before this was, we have real visibility into our customer base's pipeline. So I was trying to work out, which of the ones are doing really well at the moment, and what did they do 6 to 8 months ago that meant that they're seeing good results now. And interestingly, this is an exercise we undertook in about November of last year that served us really well. And the advice I would give, if this isn't an exercise a business has done already, is really refine your total addressable market and identify within that target account list, what is your real sweet spot ICP. And the criteria for that is, who do you have the best references for, where do you typically have the best conversions, best track record of success. And in some instances, we've seen customers reduce the companies they're practically outbounding to by about 90%, so leaving quite a small set of companies, which means they're quite a big fish in a small pond. And what it's enabled them to do is really arm their reps with a genuine understanding of that market, the challenges they face, the customer stories they have, so they can really speak for authority as if they're an expert in that area, whilst armed with success stories, which right now we're seeing is the biggest lever for a company willing to invest. Is how can you de-risk this purchase by showing us where you're successful before and having good references. The second benefit to this and what we've seen is, I've already alluded to, that there are so many more people involved in the decision-making process. So from mid-market to enterprise, where you might be speaking to a single budget holder beforehand, we're seeing additional 2 or 3 people involved in that paperwork process and review process. So what it enables you to do is, rather than shifting your focus to generating net new appointments or net new conversations within 4 or 5, medium fit target companies, you can be really focused and have your reps focus on generating 4, quite broad or up the chain meetings with a customer to really understand what they're looking at, really de-risk, someone in finance saying no to this and understanding finance initiatives. And essentially, like really embedding yourself in that account. And that's the thing to be open here. There are some companies doing really, really well, and your business pipeline is really strong. And it's because they're addressing like key initiatives that companies are spending on. That seems to be a lot of the dialogue that CFOs are pushing right now, which is they are spending, but it is key initiatives they're focusing on rather than nice to have within businesses.
It kind of connects with your point, Robin, around like doubling down on that process. And it seems like there, with what you were just saying, Paul, like there's a big focus on refinement and investing in quality activities. And I remember you saying to me all the time, like, investing in that 20% that is going to help you, get the most out of your revenue pipeline, whatever that may be.
100%. And I'll just add one thing to that, Georgia, is already alluded to the fact that a lot of channels right now are producing different results to what they were producing a year ago. And what is quite a nervy exercise, but one that we've seen some really good results from again across the board, is reducing the channels you're leveraging and the message you're taking down to the minimum viable amount you need to be operating as a sales function, and starting to test new areas. So reducing your spend in paid ads, reinvesting in LinkedIn ads, or reducing your message to like really focus on the target market you've already spoken about. Try new things and start, iterating, A/B testing, and then redoubling down on what you're using. So you can rebuild the channels, rebuild your messaging, rebuild your go-to-market on what works now that doesn't work a year ago. And that does require discipline and courage to really pull back on what you're doing, particularly right now.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts on that, Robin?
Yeah, 100%. I think when it comes to reevaluating what the sales process should be, I think what a lot of sales leaders and organizations do, they think, okay, what is our sales process today, and they try to re-clarify it and then work towards the customer. And I think it's the wrong question. The question that they should be asking themselves is, what does our sales process need to be? And that means working backwards from the customer to the infrastructure that you have. So typically, if I sit down with a sales leadership team, they'll go, right, so our process, like what tools do we have? How have we done it historically? And it's kind of useful to know that, but it's the wrong starting point. It's like, what does the customer journey need to look like? And Steve Jobs got this with Apple when devising any of his visions for Apple products was always famously said, and I'll butcher the quote, but it was about starting with the customer in mind and working backwards to the technology. And I've got a similar philosophy when it comes to sales process. I think sales is becoming, and I know this might be controversial given what you sell, but I think sales is becoming sometimes, with an exception of what you guys do, a little bit too reliant on technology first, and it slows us down. It dilutes our sales effectiveness. Rather, technology should support the people who are following the process. And I'm not a technologist, but it should be process, people, technology. And I think a lot of people think about, right, what do we need to do with our people? Like, do we need to get extra trained? Do we need to hire more people? Do we need to let people go? What's the next addition to our tech stack? And that is useful, but technology and people, for that matter, will only exacerbate a process. So if you don't have that right, you're going to be doubling down in the wrong direction. And the other thing, I think a lot of sales managers, a lot of sort of sales leaders are good at monitoring top of the funnel activity and the outcomes. Calls, open rates, demos, meetings, book, that kind of thing. But I think there needs to be more effort placed in the middle and kind of tail end of that funnel, the conversions. So deal management is especially weak in sales leaders today. And I think it just makes the team focus on the top of the funnel, which is where it's kind of tough. And you're just focusing on the stuff that contributes to burnout. So I think deal management is something that a lot of leaders need to kind of focus on. How do we win the opportunities that we've already got, rather than just trying to fill more stuff to the top of the funnel? So I think in reviewing the process and the metrics that we're using to gauge the effectiveness of that process, I think may well need a review for some organizations.
I think it's interesting, and Paul, you mentioned a story a couple of days ago around like tools and a little test you did when it came. I'm keen to hear a bit more about that, because I know that there is a huge focus on top of the funnel and increasing the amount of opportunities. But I guess from what we've been saying, focusing and doubling down on quality, making sure that we have all the processes in place when it comes to people, and the technology and frameworks to support that. I guess all of that kind of comes into what's a success, but it also needs to be managed correctly. But Paul, before we kind of get down that rabbit hole, what was the test? I'm just keen to kind of share this with everybody.
Yes, it happened post-COVID. And as a business, we're cold calling first, right? We're never going to hide that. We feel like it's the best channel, best way to generate results. And I've always been quite receptive to people calling me. We'll always hear them out. Be quite hypocritical if I was just to slam the phone down and tell them to do one. But yeah, particularly like post 2020, then 2021, I saw a real surge in my email of reasonably but like pretty non-personalized email cadences. And it became to a point, you get 10, 20 every day. So I started to test, like how viable are these SDRs actually sending out these communications. What I did was really simply, I'd be, third or fourth touch in an email cadence, and I'd just say, "Hi, ex SDR, hi Sarah, love to have a chat. Here's my mobile number." And I done it eight times across the week just to see what the general reception was to me posting my number. I got 6 email replies out of 8 with a question or them saying, "Oh, brilliant! Can I set up with an AE?" Only two calls.
Wow.
And they both meetings as well. So I think it's a real sign that there is a over reliance on certain channels like email. And to Robin's point, whenever we sit down with an SDR externally and they're really struggling, it's because there is a point of diminishing returns the amount of tech tools that you're using. And SDRs are folks spending way too much time on getting a bit of information from here, then a bit of information from here, then loading that into here, and then going to this cadence. When actually, the skill that they have and what they're effectively paid to do is to be generating good human conversations.
Definitely. I think we've probably all seen, like, especially as we go into the future and we are immersed in even more tech, like people will want even more human connection. And I think that will be even more prevalent in like sales conversations like this. I think definitely when I speak to like sales managers who manage SDR teams, they're always talking about activity metrics and different channels that they use and how conversion rates are going down. And I definitely think there's like an over reliance on that technology, but kind of what comes to your point, Robin, around like making sure the process and the people are taken care of first. If that's not being done, it will lead to the burnout that you were speaking about. Do you know what I mean? So I think we can all attest to the fact that the sales role is an absolute roller coaster. You can have some really, really high highs and they're fabulous, but also some, quite low lows. I'm sure we've all of us on this webinar have had that. Curious, Robin, when you do train those elite sales reps, what's the biggest thing or what's the biggest difference you see in them compared to others?
Discipline, I think, is a big one. We talk about motivation in sales, like getting motivating teams, what motivates people. And I think that's not bad, because we've all got motivations. I think about how disciplined someone is, because motivations can collapse very, very quickly in the face of adversity. Discipline doesn't. Well, it might take a different shape. So I think I see in, I don't believe in natural salespeople, but I believe that we have natural traits and qualities which make us more suited to sales. And I think one of those things is, how you face adversity and resilience and mindset and that kind of stuff. And I think proactivity is one as well, as opposed to reactivity. And what I mean by that is a lot of average reps will kind of, without repeating what I said at the start, but a lot of average reps will react to the problems as they come up. Top performers kind of anticipate them. They stay composed. They might have a backup plan or 2 or 3, and they've always at least one move ahead. Not always the best move, but they're not taken back by anything that happens. There aren't any surprises. I think I might be challenged on this. I think we can all agree that a global pandemic of coronavirus was something no one could anticipate for. So we can all be forgiving there. But, markets go up and down. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. It's like, well, what are you doing when it goes down? And repeat that if it worked. And that kind of comes back to the accountability piece and taking ownership. Are you blaming the marketplace? Are the leaders blaming the marketplace? Top performers don't point fingers. They take responsibility to get better. They don't just, as I say, they don't just ride the storm. They, dance in the rain, something like that. It might be uncomfortable. It might be frightening. But what else are you going to do? Because if you, there's a quote again that I'll butcher, but it does kind of remain with me around smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yep. That does ring a bell.
So it's like if you, when it gets to, these kind of tougher times and you just like kind of hunker down and you're turning to other people and you're just trying to like hold out. I get there's a degree that you have to do that, but it's like you've just become a creature of circumstance. You're not taking that ownership or that accountability. Like, do something. Even if it doesn't work, you can say you tried, and that's still more than what most people do. So I think discipline in terms of like these inherent traits that elite reps have, because anyone can learn the skills, but I think the inherent things that are harder to enhance in someone or even identify is going to be discipline, proactivity, and accountability, and how you deal with adversity. Do you collapse or do you stay composed? That I think those are things that are really worth looking for, because they're hard to find and they're hard to engineer or create in people. So if you've got reps that demonstrate that, even if they don't make all the right decisions, even if they don't get it right 100% of the time, they're still trying, and I think they're way ahead of most people. That's just my 2 cents on that.
No, I like it. And Paul, you can probably back me up here. Like when we do speak to companies who are, looking at investing in building out a SDR or a sales function, there's so much time, effort, energy, and funds that go into trying to find the right people who really do have that foundational intrinsic, accountability, that proactivity, all of those things that you're looking for, not everyone has them. And I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges when hiring for a sales team, trying to find those people that, will have a really hard day, but they'll come in the next day firing, ready to go, and are here for it. And I think there's definitely people that will learn that and can put in the hard work and grit to get there. But yeah, definitely something that we see, especially when we're hiring ourselves, is like, do they have those key qualities? And I guess on to another one of your points, which should lead to what I wanted to ask you, Paul. I think I remember, a little shout out to our CRO, Callum. I remember probably about a year ago, he was saying, I was really frustrated about this situation. He's like, it seems like you're doing a lot of planning for one scenario, but you're not preparing for multiple. And I think for a lot of reps in their early careers, it's really hard, like easy to fall into that trap. And that makes the hard times a lot harder, because you're kind of banking on something to happen like the way you think of it. But look, Paul, over your career, I'm sure you've had a lot of tough times and probably seen a lot of people go through tough times, because you've managed a lot of SDRs who are both performing and underperforming. If you were able to give your past self and other sales leaders and reps some advice, where would you look to first help to solve that underperformance issue?
Yeah, I think this is definitely relevant, given that more people are now like attacking outbound to supplement where they're at. And the main mistake I see is where people start to try and diagnose a problem. So they either go to the activity level, which is how many dials, emails, LinkedIn messages are they sending every day, or they go to the outcome part, which is how many meetings have they booked this month, and then getting to a frenzy about it being too much or too little. And I'd always ask the question first and foremost, which is how many conversations is my rep having per day? They connect to a prospect and speak to them for 1 to 10 minutes. And we already discussed that reps seem to really live behind cadences and emails now, and there's definitely a place for that, but it is very saturated and really hard to stand out. And technology should all be around removing friction, not creating more friction. And I feel like there is a point of diminishing returns where reps are just confused about where they need to spend their time. What is the real estate on their screen every day that means they're going to be dialing, and it can create them focusing on low level activity versus high level activity. So the real benchmark for me, if you're a sales leader, is my rep having 8 to 10 intelligent conversations per day? So not someone just banging the phone down when they say hi. And if they are performing under that level, then it can guide you towards the activity. What does their workflow look like? Are they spending too much time on research? Are they too reliant on technology, have you said? And quite often they struggle to navigate a switchboard. They really identify themselves as a cold caller and get shooed away straight away. They will hammer the same contacts at the same time every day on the same number and be really obvious. And they're not smart about the value of obtaining a direct dial or a mobile. And that could be through your pretty conventional ways, the tooling, or if you're really good, the more unconventional ways that generate some really good results. And I'm happy to elaborate on them. So then you can start, building out, okay, this is what the workflow needs to look like, this is what your activity needs to mean. You can generate conversations. Then once you are at that level, if they're not performing, then it's cool. Let's dive into the calls. Who are they speaking to? Is it the right persona? What is the quality of their call like? Are they showing prospects they genuinely understand challenges, or are they just feature bashing? Are they really nervous? are they too relaxed? And this is again probably where people struggle, because it's quite subjective. You listen to a call, and you judge the call on the whole call, and it's really hard to identify, where do they need to improve? What are our top reps doing that our bottom reps aren't? And one thing we started to do was really break down and quantify the really important components of a call. So back in the day, it was on a whiteboard. We identified, what are the core things you need to be doing on a call? Are you ready when they pick up? Are you engaging? Do you use a good pattern interrupt, which is like quite trendy now? Are you talking about challenges? Are you closing with dates in mind, or are you just keeping the conversation quite open? Are you asking open questions, etc.? And it's really easy to look at who's performing really well and likely ticking on those boxes and who isn't. And then you've got that specific area to really drill down on and really focus on. Now we're a bit more advanced. We use a Lego, formerly Refract, that has this all built in. And this actually really speaks to Robin's point around discipline, which is there is a huge volume of information now for SDRs to consume on LinkedIn. Anyone can have a post with a strong opinion. Sorry, Robin, about what you need to be doing and what you don't need to be doing. Rob is obviously stuff's all really good, so that's good. But there are a lot of people out there that have very conflicting views, and I see it all the time in younger reps that want to get really good and see sales development is really complicated, skill. It's so easy to be undisciplined in what works and what doesn't, and come in every day. They try a new intro, but also try a new way of pitching and a new way of closing, and just no one call is the same. And I think being able to be really disciplined on this is what works. There are small iterations, and following that every day is where I see a bit of a gap. So yeah, that's pretty my rant over for the call, but those are the main areas.
We do love a rant, but no, I think that's really, it kind of feeds into a lot what you're saying, Robin, as well. All of it does come down to that process, and cutting it up into bite-sized chunks that people can then really double down on a certain area or focus on that quality activity that's going to get them the results that they need. Have you got any additional thoughts on what Paul just said?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that there's a lot of conflicting sales advice out there, and I think my advice to someone who takes self-development quite seriously and goes on LinkedIn, reads the posts, follows the thought leaders, reads the books and all that kind of stuff, you'll get different advice. And I think I say, like, pick a team and run with it for a while. Sometimes you have to do that. Be prepared to change your approach, of course. I think we're all familiar with the expression, or the bringing out the quotes today.
Love it.
What was it? The Einstein, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think the opposite is pretty true as well. If you are doing different things over and over again and expecting similar results, that's equally as stupid. So I think for a moment at a time, you've got to use that discipline and go, you know what, I'm going to give this a really, really good crack of the whip. Be open-minded enough to change it once I look at the right metrics, which means you've got the right process. So I'm in agreement with that. I think that focusing on the basic stuff. So Paul, you said some things there are pretty trendy right now, but I'm willing to bet there are some junior SDRs or even some more experienced ones that are like, what's a pattern interrupt? Or what? And so I think, going back to the basics of that obviously this leans into what I do, so I might be a bit biased, but how you engage actual human being, I think is a little bit lost on us. I think that's one of the things we should probably be thinking about as well, rather than getting caught behind the cadences and the emails and everything. So
maybe just one last question that I just thought of now. Why do you think that has been lost to both of you?
I can tell you exactly why I think it's been lost. I think that part of it is generational.
Sure.
As tech grows, and I think we are more connected digitally than we ever have been. And tomorrow I can say that same sentence and it will be true, right? In that process, I think we are becoming less connected. You get me? Like, we're actually getting less connected at that human level, that emotional level. And you can take all the technology in the world and it's all wonderful and it can all do great things, but the piece of technology that as a salesperson you have to be able to use better than anything is this piece of software between your ears. It's 2 million years old, and if you don't know how to navigate your own and that of your prospects by being able to speak with empathy, and I will use the word persuasion. People think it's a dirty word, but I think knowing how to influence and, beyond the tech stack, beyond the emails, beyond the cadences, being able to actually connect with a human being and move them emotionally and influence this 2 million year old piece of tech that ain't going anywhere. We're forgetting how to do that, I think. And ultimately, I think that studying, and I would say this, studying things like behavioral science and psychology and actually trying to understand your buyers as humans, not as companies and as prospects and as leads, but as human beings, I think we're forgetting how to do that a lot. Yeah. So, Paul, I took some of your screen time there.
Well, good. No, I definitely agree, and I think the generational thing spans to the wider topic of this call, which is, whilst there are some people in the sales industry or in business that have seen a few downturns, the average age of an SDR is a graduate, right? So this is the first time they're facing like genuine adversity, and then if you take that profile and look at how they communicate, I don't really think that with the rise of social media, like that generation is calling people, and it is much easier to send an email and it get ignored than it is to call someone up and face the consequences of it being a really good call, but equally someone telling you to F off. And
it's the lesser of the two rejections.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't get that instant feedback. So I think that's part of it as well.
Definitely. Well, look, guys, conscious of time, I think there's been some really, really interesting points, and it seems like that there are a few things that sales and even marketing leaders can kind of double down on to take to their teams. It seems like process and refining of that and focusing on the quality has been a big one, and making sure that your reps are trained really well and have that proactivity to go out and focus on self-development and focus on the areas that they need to refine and double down on. It seems like that is a big takeaway. I think, like, with this, for everyone who is currently on, and if you have missed it, we will be compiling all of this info into a little action pack that will be available on EngageCheck's brand new website. Take a look if you haven't already. But yeah, we will link that post webinar, as well as a link to Robin to get in touch. I'd definitely chuck him a follow on LinkedIn because he has some fabulous posts. And yeah, pick his brain on all things sales training as well. But thank you, Paul. Thank you, Robin. It's been fabulous and really good to talk about, everything prospecting and how to do it in a tough time.
Excellent.
Thanks so much, Georgia.
Cheers, Georgia. Cheers, Robin.
Awesome.